Okay, thank you, sir. So I'd just like to briefly introduce Dr. Ravichandran. Dr. Ravichandran is a parent of a son with autism. That is what he'd like to say is his foremost identity. He holds a PhD in critical theory. He also holds a degree in law, and he has been teaching in 12 colleges across the state. He retired thrice as principal and was a teacher union soldier. Presently, he is the secretary of Confederation for persons with mental disabilities. He served for a full term as an elected member of the National Trust Executive Board. He is also currently the president of Tamil Nadu Special Olympic Bharath, the Tamil Nadu chapter. He's extremely happy to interact with youngsters, and he believes that the future of special needs people are going to be in the hands of these youngsters. So Ravichandran sir is going to talk to us, give us a talk today about overcoming obstacles, a call for solidarity. And I will hand over the platform to Ravichandran sir now.
Hello. Am I audible to you?
Yes, sir, you're audible. I'll just
Hello.
share your PowerPoint. Sir, you're audible.
Yes, can I begin now?
Yes, sir, you can begin. You can just tell me when you'd like your slides to be changed, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I take this opportunity at the outset to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. P.V. Vijayaraghavan, sir, and Professor of Eminence, Dr. K.V. Somasundaram, and my good friend for long, Sri Arun Aloysius, and his wonderful team for this excellent opportunity given this day to me to interact with all stakeholders and those who are going to protect our future, from Assam to Arizapa University, from Assam in the north to Arizapa University in the south. I believe there are hundreds of people mobilized for this webinar, and the entire team has been going through a lot of issues, to which I am adding to your difficulties. I'm sorry about it. With my sincere thanks to Sri Ramachandra Institute of Higher Education and Research, and to Vidya Sudha in particular, and to the team spearheaded by Sri Arun Aloysius, I begin my presentation this day by greeting all our friends. And may I request you to go to the slide that shows Helen Keller. Hello.
Sir, is this the first slide? Is it visible to you, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I can see. It is Helen Keller, and the important thing about the world knows about Helen Keller, but how many of them who adore and celebrate Helen Keller for right reasons are aware of an equally worthy lady called Mary Sullivan? It was Mary Sullivan who was the teacher of Helen Keller, who belonged to what we today categorize as DB, deaf blind. And I have been a mainstream teacher for the last 34 years, but I cannot show a handle to Mary Sullivan. I bow my head in profound respect to her, in that she made Helen Keller speak to the entire world with such audible disability that the world could not ignore her. Such was the remarkable powers of a teacher. And I believe all my young special educator comrades and students of special education courses who are part of this webinar and who are outside of this webinar will have Mary Sullivan as a great model, and Louis Braille as another great model. And by saluting whom and by dedicating this 10-minute presentation to them, I wish to begin. And we go to the next slide, which speaks about the disability aspect, which is now understood by the state as being not disabled, but being differently abled. Right. There are a number of arguments on, the politically appropriate terminology, but let us, be respectful to pair. The last slide comes to that. But as such, we will see, we'll simply try to understand the medical aspect of it is, because I understand this is a congregation of social work students who are specializing in community development and medical and psychiatry, and who are going to be frontline workers in the aspect of prevention. So, as far as a child being born or becoming differently able, the causes are, as the slide shows, both genetic and environmental. And the first cause in a country like this is consanguineous marriages. And on the preventive side, and this is where the focus of our social organizations, our NGOs, and our government should lie, I believe. Hello. Now, hello. Yes. I hope I am audible. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You are
So
audible.
the yeah, okay. Now the causes. I mean, tracing genetic causes. There are consanguineous marriages taking place every day. There are first-degree consanguineous marriages and second-degree consanguineous marriages are identified by the medical fraternity as one of the possible culprits, though we cannot exactly zoom in and say these are definite reasons. But in terms of consanguineous marriages, I believe in this country it goes largely by Jyotisha and Jataka, by horoscope predictions and all that. Greater importance must be given to genetic counseling before a consanguineous marriage begins to take place. So social work students may take up this case as one of their items on top of the agenda and try to do something on that score. 25 years back, there was no laboratory in the whole of Chennai city that would give genetic counseling. But today there are a good number of them that can offer genetic counseling. And the second cause for a person being differently able is absolute poverty and malnourishment. And this is clearly within the domain of politics. And I don't want to go into that. With poverty alleviating measures are very, very important. And third cause is, of course, accidents. And that also again needs no elaboration. The fourth cause could be old age. And I myself am not able to see you because
Sir, I'm sorry. Did you say something, sir? Sir, I believe you've muted yourself, sir. Could you please unmute yourself, sir? Yes, sir. Sir,
hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Now you're audible.
Yeah. Yeah. I came to the fourth cause of a person being differently able to old age, and I myself is a standing example of age-related hearing loss. That's why I'm robbed of the pleasure of seeing you in person and talking to you. And instead, I'm only audible and I look at my PowerPoint and give it to you. And then on the preventive side, I need to congratulate the governments, both at the center and the states, for a massive drive of oral polio vaccine, and we have eradicated polio from this country. We can be pardonably proud of our achievement on this field, on this front. But unfortunately, in terms of children being born with the condition of autism and condition of mental retardation, is in some cases is related to environmental concerns, genetic conditions. So in these areas, we need to make great progress. Now, can we go to the next slide on the charity mode to rights mode? Hello. Hello. Charity mode to rights mode. Years ago,
Sir, is the slide visible? I've changed
Hello.
it. Yes,
Is a slide change now?
yes, sir. The slide has been changed.
Okay. Now, 25 years back, when we began in the field of mental retardation, as it was known only in that phraseology, and 30 years back, there was very little knowledge in this country about autism. And today, the whole world talks about the spectrum of birth disorders. And from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, how many of the conditions lie are very clearly brought to our knowledge. And this was not available 30 years back. So naturally, in a commensurate manner, see, 3 decades back, it was all felt like, one has to do charity. And these are people who are God's children, and so they are given to special parents to handle, because they alone in God's eye are competent emotionally and otherwise to handle these children. So to such families and to such persons with special needs, we need to be very charitable and all that. That was the approach some 35 years back. But even in this state and in the whole of the country, this was changed from the charity mode to rights mode, which recognizes that a person with the so-called disability can really do things provided the inputs are given in the proper manner. So over the next 2 decades and in the contemporary context, exclusion is supposed to be removed and inclusion is to be ushered in. And as my friend and colleague in the disability sector, Mr. Ramalingam, a short while ago, said there are certain issues with inclusion. And I do agree with him when he says, and it is a very loaded statement that Mr. Ramalingam made, and I would like to elaborate on that without trampling on sensitive toes, without hurting anybody, but still as a parent, what, like, me or the speaker next to me, Mrs. Ranjini, who is doing great work in terms of application of technology for the benefit of families with special children, and who is herself a fine model of, fighting for, relentlessly for inclusion of her child in the mainstream system. And what are the issues brought with that? I will come back later in the talk. But the issue now is, 25 years back, this was not even thought of. This was beyond our imagination. Today, I am happy that the welfare approach, my friends on the community development side should take note, the welfare approach has largely been replaced by the approach of assertion and advancement. It's to say that a person with special needs steps forward and says, look here, you are not giving me any benefit of your charity or philanthropy. This is my fundamental right. And so I am entitled to these rights, and I want them to be enforced in these manners. So 15 years back, I remember, if my memory serves me right, it was Oslo where an international convention was held, to which India was also a signatory. And we signed those days, the government of India committed itself to saying that by 2020, all our public buildings will become disabled friendly. These were words used in the convention document. These are my words. They said by 2020, all public buildings in the country will become disabled friendly. And I leave it to your study and to your observation to find out whether we are able to reach this goal at all, which was set 20 years back. But I am happy at the same time, without being a harsh critic, and I should also concede that in very many buildings, they are redesigned at least to give a ramp and a side support and a railing, though disabled-friendly toilets are yet to become a reality in most public offices. But we are certainly marching towards that. And I may request you to go to the next slide. Hello. I request the coordinator. I request the coordinator to go to the Hello.
Yes, sir. Is this the slide?
Yeah, 21 disabilities as per RPWD Act. No, 21 disabilities as per RPWD Act. 2016.
Yeah, sir. So we've come to the slide, sir. Audio connection has been lost. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah, sir. We lost
Yes, ma.
our
Can you
audio
hear
for
me?
a bit. We can hear you. We can hear you, sir. Sorry for there was some technical difficulty. Can you see the slide, sir?
21 disabilities as per RPWD Act I want.
Yes, sir. We're on that slide. 21 disabilities.
Yes, exactly. So I'm sorry for the interruption. Your technical glitches. Yeah, and I quickly go through. Earlier, there were only, for 8 disabilities or so recognized by the Government of India. Today, I'm happy that the government has taken a step ahead, and it had included 21 disabilities as per RPWD Act of 2016, and the disabilities include very notably like the say acid attack victims and muscular dystrophy and dwarfism, and there are there is some small issues over defining. Let us take one disability which is recently included, dwarfism. The international norm, it appears to be 4 feet and 1 centimeter, but the last I heard about this from friendly officials was that in India it was 4.4 centimeters or 4.3 centimeters, whereas in US it is 4. In India it is 4.1, but in US and other countries it was 4.4 centimeters, 4.3 centimeters would also qualify for dwarfism. This was one section which was extremely marginalized, but I am happy that they are also now brought within the ambit of the act, and like very much like muscular dystrophy and acid attack victims. There was a time when we were fighting on the streets and writing letters to the ministers for justice that these are people like thalassemia and others like who should also be brought within the ambit of persons with disabilities. I am happy that the number has gone up to 21. And can we go next to the next slide or level on methodology? And this pertains to the census. Hello. I suppose I'm audible.
Yes, sir. You are audible, sir.
And yes, I'll kindly go to the slide on methodology. This is going to speak about the next 2-3 slides will be about the actual figures of people who are differently able across India. And I would still say that year after each time the latest census figures that we have are of 2011. But here, as before, there is some marginal improvement in taking a head count. And first of all, our friends in the who are pursuing courses in community development in social master for doing the masters in social work should understand what is the need for statistics here. The need for statistics is that, like, it gives the finance department, the department that holds the key to all welfare measures, right? Which is the most important and all-powerful department, be it the central government or the state government. They need figures, they need statistics so that they can make arrangements. So it is very important for us, all of us in this field, to concentrate on the methodology adopted to do the head counting. I would say it is not exactly, though I may not say it is wholly faulty as the slide shows, it can still be largely, improved. For example, in the earlier census, so many of the disabilities were left out. This is a very interesting story. Somebody can do an entire paper on the history of census with regard to differently abled in Tamil Nadu or India. Now, the grounds of asking questions varied from very unscientific method of doing, and earlier still there was only unless the family came forward to report. There is the census taking person, largely school teachers, will never get to know whether or not the household supports persons with special needs. And there was largely social stigma, and so the families were not coming forward to report like they have if you're a movement challenged child or a child with an intellectual disability. The more so, if the child happens to be with some intellectual disability, there is very little familial acceptance, and consequently the families wouldn't be reporting. And so this led to the third factor of gross underestimation in figures. And let us move on to the next slide, please. Some facts about disability. As per previous 2001 census and National Sample Survey Organization 2002. Could I get the help of my wonderful friend there to move on to the next slide, please, on some facts about the disabled numbers.
So we've come to that slide, sir. Some facts about disabled numbers.
Have we come back, ma? Yes.
Yeah, we've come. Yeah, we've come. Back.
So now the NSSO 2002. It said look at the variation there. Where the sample survey reporting only 1.98% of the total population. Census 2001 completed a year ago, it reported 2.13%. So 11th plan put it at vaguely at 6%, right? And among the disabled, there are figures, right? And I don't want to go deep into those issues. I would request to move over to the next slide, which is the current scenario, which is very interesting. Hello, could you move over to the next slide, please? As per 2011 census.
Yes, sir.
India has a total of India has a total of 2.68 crores of people with all sorts of disabilities. And the breakup of figures shows the usage of the term mental retardation is still there. MR at 5.6%, hearing impairment at 18.9%, visual impairment at 18.8%, locomotor, there is those who are with movement wise challenges 20%, mental illness, another unfortunate category, 8%, and multiple disabilities at 8%. So, in fact, I went into consultation mode with Mr. Arunalaishis yesterday, and we're breaking our heads to find out how many exactly are the intellectually disabled persons in each state. Instead, all that we could get instead of concrete numbers is that in terms of percentage only. So it simply says, in terms of percentage wise, it has only say 4.4% IDs out of in Tamil Nadu, as per that is not part of the slide given here, but I'll be happy to give you the home scenario. In our own home state of Tamil Nadu, as per 2011 census, a total of 13,35,219 persons who were differently abled, and according to some sources, the percentage of population with intellectual disabilities comes to around 4.4%. But what is worrisome for us, as you can see from the slide, is the increase in numbers. In that, in the earlier census of 2001, the percentage of the differently abled population was only 2.13%. But in 2011, in 10 years, there is a rise of 0.8%, out of 2.21% increase. So this must really, it may look innocent in terms of 0.8%, but in real-time figures, when converted, they certainly give you a lot of worry in terms of, the sheer numbers to handle. Now, I will come to the crux of the issue. The title of my talk is a call for solidarity among stakeholders. I'm thankful that Mr. Arun and his team had brought together a group of very experienced senior professors of medicine under whose auspices and presence students of sociology, students of social work, students of clinical psychology, students of special education programs, and therapies of various kinds, including physiotherapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy, are all assembled through this virtual platform. I'm thankful to them. So this is where we need to see, we are so many of us assembled here, from Assam to Arizona University in the south, but there is no officially recognized coordination mechanism among stakeholders. Or very plainly put, shorn of research jargon, in plain English, if I say what I mean by this, I will elaborate that the parent is of a special child. He is living on an isolated island. The special teachers who are paid a pittance are living in their own island of sorrow and trauma. And the therapists, they are also living in their own world. So the persons, the field level social workers who go to identify these families, who have to bring in these children to either the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan or to the special school mode of training and education, they work at some point of time, and thereafter the families may or may not be in touch with them. I believe there is the absence of one overarching umbrella under which all of us stakeholders will come together, needs to be created with the help of a statute. So this is a major obstacle I see in terms of providing effective services to these children and adults with special needs. And two, there is no boost to infrastructure. And this I will club with the other point of my slideshow, that there are no regulations by the state and central government. What do I mean by these two things? It is not as though governments in the state and center are unaware of the difficulties of individuals with disabilities or their supporting families. But what is being done is, what no doubt is praiseworthy, but we have to go a long, long way. That is what I want to humbly assert here. See, for example, I will cite just one instance where the state government issued a circular 15 days back in line with the state government say November or so. But and 10 days thereafter, the a relevant department for welfare of the differently able issues circular, which speaks only of special schools for the visually challenged and the hearing impaired, because the order very clearly says from standards 1 to 8. The order was unfortunately silent on what happens to the special schools and children covered under SSA. Now, is it real inclusion? Certainly not. Now we have to write to the commissioner, and fortunately we have a young and dynamic officer who was very responsive, and he had sent in and addressed the lacunae by issuing a comprehensive circular on the do's and don'ts and evolving a standard operating procedure for our schools. And as Mr. Ramlingam, with his years of experience, briefly touched upon, and because that was not his main topic, he nevertheless it was on the spectrum into mainstream school. I believe my next speaker, Mrs. Ranjini, as a parent struggling, how she feel the
Sir, I believe you've muted yourself, sir. Could you please unmute? Sir, we're unable to hear you. You have muted yourself, sir.
am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you're back now.
Yeah. Now I began by elaborating on the hurdles. I said there is no boost infrastructure. I said there is no overarching mechanism which can include all stakeholders, who are now the individual stakeholders like parents, special education professionals, the therapists, the social workers, the government. They're all acting in isolated islands with no central force of connectivity. So I wish there is a legislated mechanism, a statutory body, which will bring all the stakeholders under one umbrella and allow a common platform to evolve a plan of action which is focused, which is time-bound, which is goal-oriented, and which functions with facile ease. And the next point that I wanted to say is the governments at the center and the state are doing commendable support in terms of giving monthly financial assistance to the individual with special needs. Under old age pension scheme, each child gets 1,000 rupees. If the child is lucky enough to come under the department of under the commissionerate of differently abled welfare, the child and its family gets 1,500 rupees per month. And the central government passed the National Trust Act in 1995 with absolute unanimity in Parliament, with no party raising a simple issue, and without a discussion, they all raised their hands and said, pass, pass, pass. And that is a very healthy sign of Indian democracy. But then, what was allotted to National Trust was a pittance of 100 crores. And with the creation of the National Trust, the government of India found it convenient to say that, look, if you have any issues with intellectual disability, go to National Trust and they will take care of it. And what can National Trust, with this pittance of 100 crores, can do? I leave it to your imagination, right? And there are any number of functional issues which I do not want to elaborate that the parents face. To get a guardianship certificate, we have to wait for months and months. And that apart, the SSA, briefly touched upon by Mr. Ramlingam, I hope will be further elaborated by my next speaker, Mrs. Ranjini, who is fighting a hot battle to get our children included into mainstream schools in terms of appointing shadow teachers and all that. This is something absolutely new. But inclusion as it is practiced in the West, it will, I think we in India we are lagging behind by at least a decade and more. I saw the certificate of the individual assessment plan of a child going to going to school. I cannot say it's a special. The child is going to a mainstream school. The bus stops. If the bus stops for the neurotypical children at a particular point, the federal government has made it a law that the bus would stop at the very doorstep of the child and pick it. And that kind of protection and that kind of inclusion is happening in countries like the USA and in certain other countries in much better fashion than the government of the federal government in the United States is doing. And we'll simply say that in Tamil Nadu and in India, we are lagging far, far behind the real pole star of inclusion. And the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is quite well funded. But one practical gap that I find, and which is worrisome to a senior parent like me, is that it does not have an individualized education plan, which is the cornerstone of all special education, as our special educator friends here and students will certainly appreciate. The individualized education plan varies from one individual to another individual. No two children on the spectrum show the same kind of issues or throw the same kind of behavioral challenges. So I need not elaborate on the importance of individualized education plan and the training plan for each child on the spectrum. But in the whole of SSA, I don't think one can hear the concept of IEP at all. So all that is sought to be done is to bring mainstream schools spread over a geographical territory of 80 square kilometers and get them under the jurisdiction of 5 special educators. I pity these friends who are 5 special educators trying to man a territory of 80 square kilometers, and all that they can do in real terms is to visit the child or get the child to school and see whether the child is okay. And I don't know, out of 21 recognized disabilities, if there are going to be only 5 special teachers, and out of the 5 of them, definitely 2 of them would go towards mental retardation and autism, and 1 may go to multiple handicap. And what about visual impairment or hearing impairment? I doubt very much. You take lakhs of students going to college education in Tamil Nadu. There is only one mainstream college like Presidency in Chennai, which was the first to start a separate section for BCom for hearing impaired students. It was a tremendous hit, and this was done some 10 years back. I should say some 7 batches of graduates. Hello, I suppose I'm audible. 7 sets of graduates have come out of Presidency College with BCom degrees, flashing their BCom degrees. The next major hurdle that I could see in this field is underutilization of human resources and very poor payment. All special teachers, therapists attached to recognized special schools and under SSA are not regular employees. They are only on ad hoc basis payment, and the poor payment is a very bad sign, because unless a teacher is assured of her regular income, unless a teacher is assured that she need not have finance-related anxieties in sustaining her family life, I'm afraid no human being can render complete justice. So I would appeal only to the powers to see that, the poor payment with regard, the present payment is only 14,000 rupees to a therapist attached to a special school and 14,000 rupees to a month to a special educator. Now, I'm not finger pointing at anybody. I'm not blaming the system. All I want to do is the system to improve and recognize the difficulties before a special educator. I've been a mainstream educator for 35 years plus. And many of my students are flourishing and prospering in their lives as top administrators. Many of them are district collectors, many of them are RDOs, many of them are DSPs, SPs. But I would say my 34 years of teaching experience in mainstream education will not stand by the side of a special educator who tried her best for 30 days to enable my son to take a spoonful of boiled rice to his mouth without spillover. I say pranams to her. I say the job of a special educator is 100 times manifold, more manifold, challenging than the job of the mainstream educator. Right? Even the job of the mainstream educator is multitasking these days, that he has to be a magistrate, he has to be a policeman, he has to be a psychologist, and besides being a teacher of the subject. But even more challenging than the job of the mainstream educator is the job of the special educator, is the job of the therapist, right? And I would only appeal to the government, even under the SSA and under the recognized special schools, to create the posts of caregivers, IRs, because these are children who may not have bladder control, may require frequent visit to the toilets. We have been taking up this issue with the government, and I repeat, the purpose of the talk is not to play blame game. No, this is all to give you an idea of what exactly is happening to our children entrusted to SSA or entrusted to the care of a special school. Now, coming to the social side of it, is what are the hurdles? The joint family system has collapsed. And so the parents today of special children who are 60 plus, the largest question looming before their eyes is, what happens to this child? And I'm gone. I'm glad that the government is now beginning, the state government is now beginning its efforts in this direction, and it is thinking of an inclusive community living. And I wish the commissionerate and the Department of the Differently Abled Welfare show the necessary pace and urgency in taking up this inclusive living concept and make it a concrete reality, both figuratively and metaphorically. And the other hurdles are corruption and poor funding. And poor funding I had already touched upon. And in terms of corruption also, it is a regular harassment of several stakeholders, in that year after year in producing stability certificate for the schools they run, in order to give a fire safety certificate that they are supposed to give. Now a great deal of money needs to be parted with, and all these all unfortunately are part of the package. And I have elaborated quite at length on the obstacles. And now I say, what are the opportunities for solidarity? How do we get together? How do we come under one umbrella? How do we put all our heads together? How do we sublimate our individual ego and look for the collective gain of our children who are born with a challenge, who are not neurotypical, who may need advanced care, or who may need some small care, but cannot be absolutely independent unless some miraculous efforts on the scientific field emerge. But the opportunities that are right now available 30 years back. 30 years back, to get an IQ done, there were only 1 or 2 psychologists in the whole of Chennai. I thank all the gods that this situation is now totally gone. And there is a tremendous amount of knowledge explosion. There is dissemination of knowledge. There are any number of excellent youngsters like you who can measure IQ, who can point out, who can chalk out the individual education program. So I see the biggest opportunity for me as a parent, and for Mrs. Ranjini as a parent, and for hundreds and thousands of other parents across India. My single biggest asset before me is this knowledge explosion in recent times. Of course, I would say, as a mainstream education researcher, I would say greater funding than was made available to find out about fighting the scourge of HIV. Not even 1/10 of that was allotted to finding out what happens to these children. Why are they born with autism? What happens to them? How do they dupe the best of pediatricians after the 30 years of their month by not missing a single milestone? But the time bomb within them explodes at the 30th month, leading to poor eye contact, leading to lack of sense proportion. There's no knowledge of colors. There's no money concept. There's no time concept. Why does it happen? And where does the mind exactly reside? Shakespeare said, the mind in the liver of man. Our Indian psychological system says manas is the seat, and ahankara is seated there. These are all on the theological or on the spiritual side, but and on the literary side as well. But there is no PT scan or PET scan or CT scan that can exactly say where exactly the human mind resides. But my modern science is advanced to the extent that if certain drugs are given, that the mind behaves in a better manner and more manageable. The sleep increases, the quality of life increases. But in a crucial area like this, in the study of the brain and its and its inscrutable ways, heavy funding is called for in terms of research, but that is not forthcoming. But I hope that the developing countries will soon turn their attention to contributing to knowledge growth. And there is increased parental awareness. There is increased societal awareness that was not there, say, some 25 years back. And I should thank ICT, the information and communication technology, and the evolution of social media platforms that make exchange of information possible. Today, it is possible for me to interact with a parent in Great Britain, with a parent in Guruanjari, with a parent in Italy. It was not possible 25 years back. And my next speaker is doing a commendable job, Ms. Ranjani, in terms of running a group. Why one group? She runs 2-3 groups for parents, for experts, for friends of parents. So this is a greatly enabling tool. Well, I would say this, I certainly count this as a great blessing on us. And the final blessing, I should say, is the possibilities given in terms of non-pharmacotherapy options. This is where, the pharmacotherapy, my salutes to all the psychiatrists, psychiatric nurses in managing children during the pandemic, especially children with behavioral disorders, were posing huge challenge to parents because they could not relate to the lockdown. They could not break away from the routine which gave them a sense of mental comfort. That threw them absolutely, lack of routine threw them out of gear, and they were banging doors, banging beds, they were indulging in self-injurious behavior. And mercifully, the pharmacotherapy came to some rescue. But more experienced parents felt the pharmacotherapy can be a stopgap arrangement because it necessarily brings in certain unavoidable side effects, as allopathy has the wisdom to admit and to advertise, other than quacks, right? That way, though it is helpful pharmacotherapy, I believe the physiotherapy, the occupational therapy, the other therapies put together can make a child or a young adult stay focused on a chosen job, go do the routine and derive emotional component, thereby reduce medication and dependence on and strain the nerves of doctors giving them care. So this is where I would say there is a subtle difference between impairment and disability. I request my young listeners here who are into social issues of psychiatry, those who are into disability, and find out the distinction between impairment and disability. As my slide points out, impairment is deeply and intimately personal. It is almost natural, right? It is something like my losing 1 or 2 fingers in an accident. That might be impairment. Why? Even autism at the individual level is an impairment, and it is personal. But we are not right in totally calling it as impairment, because more appropriate usage would be disability, because it brings in socio-cultural ostracism. It leads to economic marginalization. And we had the Secunderabad Center recognized about 124 jobs as jobs worthy of being carried out by children with by adults and young adults with intellectual disabilities, like making cane chairs, like being lift operators, by being office assistants. I wonder how many of them were employed under the scheme in a country with acute unemployment, whether this child, no matter whatever is the reservation figures to show on the piece of paper, but in practice what happens is that disability leads to economic marginalization, makes this group of children and adults and their families socially vulnerable. And while impairment is natural, disability is absolutely man-made. So this is where social workers may take to a greater job. And I would say, as part of my patriotic duty, that prevention. I request our friends to go to help me with the next slide, prevention. And proper medical care at the time of childbirth is very important. Prevention of infection to newborns, and addressing folic acid deficiency, and through the National Health Mission, which is doing a great job in setting up district early intervention centers with one dental surgeon, with one psychologist, and with one hearing impairment specialist at work. This is commendable across India. The DECs are doing a great job. But I would say what these district early intervention centers do must be carried to taluk level at each taluk headquarters, because the district early intervention centers attached to district headquarter hospitals are under a huge strain. And any intervention in the human brain, if it needs to be successful, has to be carried out before the child turns 4. So I would only say, as a senior parent, that younger parents are not caught, and suddenly the thunderbolt is not thrown on their heads. They would be reeling under it. So if the early intervention centers numbers are increased, and our effective intervention into the human brain is complete by the time the child completes 4 years, there will be less and less of a need for dependence on medication. And so the child will be taken better care of by parents while at home, and the quality of the child's life and the family life will improve. So a taluk level intervention is necessary. And I one last slide, though it doesn't make much sense to go. I mean, change a name and then say everything is changed. But in terms of our cultural values, we can say, can you please go over, madam, to the other slide, which says using people first language as the right thing to do. I wind up my talk by appealing to all people. Please don't say handicapped people or differently able people, or first of all, put the person first and the condition next. Please say Paul has autism, or Ramachandran has Down syndrome, or Mary. You don't say Mary is a dwarf. Kindly say Mary is of short stature. And the important thing for us is, don't say the child is non-verbal. Please say the child is capable of communicating in her own ways, and we must equip ourselves to read what the child tries to speak and convey effectively. And with these words, I once again thank Sri Ramachandra Higher Education Institution and all our friends there, the wonderful Arun Aloysius and his young team, which put up with my personal hearing loss and my technical illiteracy and managed this talk to some extent. I thank you once again.
Thank you very much, sir, for throwing light on the various obstacles that exist as well as addressing the stakeholders and calling for solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.